It's Michelle, and there's been quite a few part diagnoses, but the last one was known as a spasmodic flaccidity. That's by my current speech therapist. But there's also like a type of dysphonia, and also having a glottal gap as well between the vocal cords. I used to talk a lot on the phone. I used to work with using the telephone as well, so that I don't speak as much now on the phone as I used to, because it becomes a bit difficult, hard for people to understand, and I get tired, so it can actually be hard work. I first had caught a really bad cough, and that lasted for about 3 months. And from then, my voice changed. I started sounding like Marge from The Simpsons. And went to my GP. I had a couple of rounds of antibiotics. That didn't seem to work. So then I was then referred to an ENT specialist. They were still weren't really sure what actually happened. All that I had was strained vocal cords. Had a few rounds of cortisone tablets. And they weren't really sure what had happened. They'd mentioned something also called Reicke's edema, but something was never really pinpointed. So that probably lasted for about 6 weeks. Then I was referred to go and see to Melbourne Voice, and saw a speech therapist there for maybe 3 months, and they still weren't sure what actually had happened. So for months I was having like stroboscopies done, and I sort of felt a bit like a guinea pig, because I wasn't actually sure what was happening and what was going on. And people around me were saying, "Oh, what's happening, Michelle? You're going here, you're having these procedures done," but no one really knew what was happening. So it was quite hard, and that was probably the worst period, where I had to have voice rest but didn't really know why. Having other tests, but it was still like a bit of a mystery. So it was really hard to sort of explain that to the people I work with, because I was on the phone and I had to stop using the phone. I couldn't no longer speak on the phone because it was making my cords. They were actually it was harder to speak. Everything was just an effort. So in the end, I sort of felt a bit isolated at work. Work colleagues would say, "Oh, when do you think you'd be back on the phone? You're sort of making it difficult for us to take leave." So I sort of felt a little bit alienated, and it was really difficult then. Things now I've sort of I don't have as many friends as what I used to, just because there's not as many, we don't speak a lot on the phone anymore. It's sort of really either message, SMS or email. So the friends that I've had for like a number of years, and partner Frank as well, we sort of tend to have like a small group, rather than there used to be like, say, 12 or 14 people that we'd go out with quite often, whereas that's now changed. It's probably gone down to 5 or 6. Frank and I would go out, a couple of times a week. I'd go to movies with a girlfriend quite regularly. And so from being out to this social thing, it's sort of more smaller groups, places that are quiet. We'd check out the acoustics and find out if there's a quiet corner, and just sort of still go out, but sort of modify what we used to do. I wish I could yell. I haven't yelled for years. And just sometimes, like, you'll go in, you may order a coffee. Lucky wherever we go. I find that I'm in somewhere new, it's hard. Ordering off a menu is difficult, or asking for a drink, you sort of have to repeat yourself. But if it's a familiar place, they know what it is, and they can just take the order and no problem. Yeah, look, I think I've actually become a bit more confident, not afraid to speak up, ask for help, be more assertive. If I'm not comfortable doing something, I'll speak up, or if I don't want to do, or just even to learn to say no would always be, prior to this, it would always be, yeah, I can do it. Whereas now, if I'm not up to it, I'll say no. In the beginning, I guess, like I've had maybe 3 or 4 different speech therapists from the same, because from the same company. Some were positive, some were not so positive. Oh, you sound terrible today, Michelle, or have you been doing your therapy? Some would be positive, some, if there was a bit of, sometimes it'd be a bit of negative. Gee, you sound terrible, or you really need to work on this, or maybe Botox hasn't worked in this instance. So yeah, I guess it just really depends on how their make were. Oh, it's been great. Like, it's been a saviour, really. Like, I'd started going before I'd had my procedures, and at first I thought, oh God, I sound like an idiot, rolling my R's and, just doing, unfamiliar tunes. But then everything would just start rolling off. Now I do my therapy in the car on the way to work through, using Bluetooth. So it's really helped a lot. And even just with breathing, and if I know that I'm going to be somewhere that's loud, sort of take a step back and probably observe the acoustics of where you are, and just, I think, just make you more aware of your surroundings and noise levels. Probably more the day in, day out of how exhausting it is actually to speak. And by the end of the day, things don't always go according to plan. Like, you may say, yeah, you want to go out or catch up with someone after work, and then realise, oh, after 8 hours of work, it's enough. I need a bit of quiet time. So things aren't always as easy as just, okay, well, you can have your procedure that will last, 8 to 10 months. But it's always, every day is an effort. It sort of becomes an effort by the end of the day. It becomes tiring. I guess always comment on your voice, or you sound terrible. That's like even walking someone down the street and you're looking at someone and they be maybe either too thin or overweight, and say like, oh, you're too skinny, or you're too fat. It's the same, like, oh, you sound terrible. That's something that really, it used to probably affect me more, but probably now not so much. But if I haven't seen a relative or a friend for a while, and the first thing is, oh, you sound terrible, have you got a cold, or what's happened to you? It's like, well, don't really want to disclose what's actually happened, that I've had, 7 procedures and 10 lots of Botox over 7 years, and I'm see a speech therapist, every month, and, it's just like, becomes almost too personal. Like to listen, and if you're not comfortable with doing something, make sure that they're aware of that, and just speak up and just take a note of where you want to go out, where you want to meet, and it's also like the time you want to meet as well. Like, evening is always difficult because after a day of work you can't become really tired. It can become quite exhausting. And I know for me, like in the beginning, after the procedure, I have to have a week off work and then do speech therapy quite regularly. So I sort of tend to time things to have sort of like a quiet month or so afterwards, and then eventually build up to doing things. But then it's the same when, almost time to have another procedure done. Just be wary and just observe what's around and how you're feeling. And if you know when they're not sounding so great. it's probably like an annual procedure now, and I go into Monash Hospital in Moorabbin in Melbourne, and just a day procedure, and I have a collagen, which is also known as a Prolarum Plus, and it's injected into the vocal cords, and I'm awake. I have a local anaesthetic, and there's 2 ENT surgeons. One has the stroboscopy that goes up the nose, and then the ENT surgeon will then inject the collagen into my vocal cords. So I'm awake. I'm just sitting in almost like a dental chair and at twilights, and I'm still awake. I can feel it go in. I can feel like the local, and then also be like a slight sedation through that I think sniff to also like relax the nasal passages and numb them, and then the surgeon will then inject onto either to both sides, the left and the right of the vocal cord, and then that's only maybe 5 minutes, and then they'll check you in the chair maybe for about 10 minutes, and then you walk out to the recovery area and sit on a recliner for about an hour to make sure the airway is clear, there's no obstruction, and then you'll be on full voice rest for about 48 hours. And then once breathing is all intact, you then sent home. Yeah, when I speak, now the speech therapist has said to try and get in as many words within a certain amount of time and then take a breath rather than to keep talking. So then that way the voice is softer, and to also watch and ask open questions as well rather than short, because then that way I can get more in one sentence. It's been a long journey, because maybe for really 2 or 3 years I really didn't know what was going on, and really, in hindsight till today, it's still don't know why it actually happened. What actually happened to my vocal cords. But I probably, I did quite a bit of research, but I think I'd probably be a bit more confident in the professionals rather than sort of be a bit more sceptical, because around me, like people I work with, family, friends, they may have been a little bit more sceptical as well, thinking, oh, why are you doing this? Now I actually wouldn't listen to anyone. I would just go ahead and just experiment and just probably listen to what professionals say, but don't take it all as gospel. Speak up if you're not comfortable. And yeah, look, I was rapt that I was experimented, because if I didn't experiment, I wouldn't know, and I wouldn't probably be able to speak as best as I could today than if I say I was doing Botox, because Botox wasn't successful for me. I think that's been like a really good, I wasn't feeling like isolated, but I know now that it's not just me out there with a voice disorder. There's so many others, and I guess you don't feel as much as a freak. You know that, in a good way, like, oh God, I'm not. I am quite normal, and I'm going to start crying now. Like when we first met, I was like, oh my God, someone else sounds like me. And it was sort of like a relief, because you sort of wonder why did this happen? And it's not debilitating, and I wake up every morning and I can breathe, and there's worse things to have, but it's still something that's that isn't right. But yeah, it was like I felt really comfortable with everyone, and even like coming here was like, oh, this is okay, I can do it. And it's just, yeah, it's probably comforting. and you know that you're actually normal, which is good, which is good. And thanks to social media, as good as it may be, and bad as well. But yeah, it's good, and you can communicate, and it's just comfortable knowing that you guys are there.
Yeah, that other people understand.
Yeah, and they understand what's going on. And look, my family and partner and friends are great, but it's also good to have that on the side. Like my sisters are always with me, and they come look after me, and it's just good to have that alternative
Support
and have that support network.
Really kind of go,
And they understand, and it is, because it can be quite a struggle, especially like later down the track when you need to have the procedure done. Everything becomes a bit harder. Not just speaking voice, it's breathing, wanting to walk upstairs or to go for a walk, like a really lengthy walk, maybe quite steep, and that's what affects. It's not just the voice, it's everything else.